Battlefield 2142 is taking us 200 years forward the events of the first ever Battlefield game and the war that took place in 2042 in the latest Battlefield game. So, in 2106, the world has frozen. After 100 years of debate and dissension, the world's governments were forced to face the reality of global warming. The next ice age had arrived. The new ice age began in the year 2106 as temperatures plummeted and a massive ice wall began to move south from the North Pole. By 2131, much of the northern hemisphere had been consumed by the cold, with the ice wall extending as far as Italy. The freezing cold consumed living space and resources in the north, forcing populations in these areas to attempt to migrate south. These mass migrations caused several conflicts to arise and old alliances to crumble across the globe. The European Union fell into civil war between its members and nearly collapsed. The only way to survive the Ice Age was through some degree of cooperation, and 6 major coalitions were formed among the remaining nations. The European Union reorganized itself into a military coalition, while Russia formed a new Russo-Asian military alliance known as the Pan-Asian Coalition. The African nations, controlling a major portion of the remaining unfrozen land on Earth, formed the Union of African States. Despite the existential threat posed by the Ice Age, relations between European Union and PAC were in a poor state sometimes before the war. Both fractions were spying on each other. As the result, the European Union was able to capture Titan and Battlewalker technology from the PAC, and the PAC stolen a prototype Mk-15 Bandit from the European Union and used it to create the US-8 Ocelot. The combined effort of multiplied United States and European arms manufacturers would go on to create the SCAR-11, the standard issue rifle for the European Union in an upcoming war. The Union of African States became an important ally to the European Union, as the Union would supply much of Europe's energy and food through the joint projects. Those included Shuhia Taiba, a large-scale agricultural project located in the northern Egypt, and the Sidi power plant, which would provide more than 14% of the European Union population's energy by the year 2143. European Union troops would subsequently be stationed in northern Africa to assist the African Union in defense of those sites. By early 2138, around 10 billion people on Earth, the world's 6 superpowers, were heavily fortified, ready to fight over the remaining land and resources. The Pan-Asian Coalition sets its sights on conquering Africa and the Mediterranean, expecting an invasion by PAC into the now agriculture-rich plains of North Africa. The European Union concentrated its resources along the Mediterranean, ready to assist the Union of African States. A diversion by 2 PAC battalions into Egypt seemed to confirm their suspicions, but the attacks were merely decoys, meant to distract the world from the PAC's primary objective for the first part of the war: to destroy the military might of the European Union's premier units still left in Europe. The Cold War began in October 2139, with coordinated PAC invasions from the Persian Gulf to the Baltic Sea. In November, as part of the Operation Canute, 3 battalions led by General Arkady Petrov entered Minsk, a key European Union command center in the northern Europe. The European Union Kriegspanzer 2nd Regiment fiercely defended the city for over 4 months until PAC Elite Central Command Group broke through their southern flank, forcing them to withdraw. The Battle of Minsk featured the first employment of the militarized Titan in combat operation, changing the nature of modern warfare forever. Because of the Titan's unmatched effectiveness as both a transport and assault medium, its destruction became a crucial component of military strategy. At Minsk alone, 6 full-scale Titans were destroyed within the first week of combat. In February 2140, a PAC and 2nd Command Divisions swept through Serbia and trapped the European Union 9th Armored Corps in the heart of Belgrade, with a massive ice wall blocking its retreat. The European Union force, inspired by General Emil Nicolai, staged a tensions resistance. In March, the PAC Northern Command Group arrived through recently annexed Bulgaria. Led by a swift V-shaped formation of T-39 Bogatyr battle walkers, the PAC forces burst through the European Union eastern flank and forced their surrender. With control of Eastern Europe, the PAC turned its sights to the European Union's Central Command in Berlin. On July 10, 2140, as part of Operation Thunder, 15 squadrons of PAC gunships wrested control of the skies above eastern Germany. The victory allowed PAC Titans to airdrop entire regiments of the Northern Command Group behind the EU Brandenburg's Line. Expeditionary Force quickly capitulated. The path to Berlin was cleared. On August 15, the PAC waged an all-out offensive on the city. After 2 months of intense fighting, Berlin fell. The remaining EU forces retreated to France, where they would make a last stand before evacuating to Africa. By the end of 2140, the PAC occupied much of Europe, but had yet to gain control of the Mediterranean. Northern France represented a key strategic passage, but it was a narrow one, given the wall of ice that had advanced all the way to the 49th parallel. The PAC sped into Lorraine to find a small but resilient EU company holding a section of the Maginot Wall in Verdun. The T-8 Tiger main battle tank more than held its own against the newer Type 32 Nekomata Hoover tank, allowing the European Union to hold the position for almost a month. Despite being significantly outnumbered, the European Union forces at Verdun were able to severely deplete the invading PAC division. This effort was due to a large part of the European Union's ability to infiltrate and destroy PAC Titans before they could distribute troops and supplies to the front lines. Soon, the PAC matched those efforts, inflicting similar damage to their EU Titan counterparts. By 2142, Serber Landing was the last European Union stronghold on the European continent. The port served as the chief's defensive hub for the EU Northern Mediterranean operations. Tasked with seizing the harbor, PAC General Yuri Vladimirovich used commando units equipped with a new IT-33 optical camouflage to infiltrate the city. Once inside there, sabotage the defenses, allowing the general to land his forces in the main harbor. There, they faced the Hell Brigade, the EU premier infantry unit assigned to defend the city. The ensuing violence would establish Serber Landing as the most costly battle of the Cold War. The European Union forces have set their sights on the expanse in the Arabian Peninsula, once known as Highway Tampa. In a desperate attempt to keep their mechanized division operational in the European Union must claim the surviving oil resources and seize the only remaining harbor from the PAC control. Facing the loss of support from their Titan, the remaining PAC forces have taken refuge in Azio City. With the PAC having limited armor and few supplies, the European Union have set an offensive move from an infamous Anzio bridgehead in the southeast. History books will call Operation Shingle the bloodiest battle in the European Union campaign, causing the greatest suffering and damage to the PAC forces. The attack on Camp Gibraltar was the first deception attack used by PAC to drive EU forces out of position. Although not of military significance, the site was an important standing point for refugees from the Western Mediterranean territories. On April 10, 2142, the PAC AA Command Division attacked the camp. The European Union's 4th and 5th Armored Battalions were tasked with defending Camp Gibraltar. The European Union Command relied on sniper tactics to hold key positions in an attempt to occupy the PAC forces as long as possible. By the end of 2142, freezing temperatures, mass migration and warfare had rendered most of the Pac's occupied territories uninhabitable. Desperate to sustain its dwindling population, the PAC changed its military focus to capturing key energy, food and water supplies. Taiba, a large-scale European Union agricultural project located in northern Egypt, was one of the PAC primary targets. On November 11, a fleet of Titans carrying 6 PAC command divisions flew into the skies above. They were immediately greeted by the EU's Second Army. The resulting battle raged for more than a year. Both sides utilized more than 20 Titans between them. By the end of fighting a year later, only 2 remained. Continuous assaults rendered half of the capabilities useless by the first month. Years later, covered in metal carnage, Taiba would be referred as the Titan Graveyard. In January 2143, the PAC tried to appropriate another key resource target in Egypt, the city power plant. The recently constructed facility provided more than 40% of the European Union's population's energy. With each coalition depleted from manpower and equipment, the battle began primarily as a ground war. The EU 3rd and 4th Infantry Divisions established 3 lines of defenses, fighting off wave after wave of incursions by PAC Special Forces. In March, armored and airborne divisions arrived for both sides. Within weeks, the fight intensified to become one of the largest and most fervent of the entire war. At the first, PAC utilized its depleted Titan fleet in its attack on the city power station. Soon, however, the ground war intensified. More air support and delivery was required. Within a month, the skies were again filled with Titans. As the PAC launched diversionary strikes from Italy into North Africa, it secretly gathered forces in the Sinai Peninsula to prepare for a full-scale assault on the continent. On May 1st, 4 PAC command divisions flew into Libya to engage the EU 6th Army Group. This left the 5th Corps of the Suez Canal without support when the Southern Command Group, led by General Munokoi, raced into Egypt. European Union forces staved off Munokoi's army until help finally arrived via 10th Airborne Division. Had the PAC seized the Suez Canal, it would have severely compromised the European Union's ability to defend Africa. To attack the European Union's Suez Canal position, the PAC relied on a Titan squadron to transport assets into the field battle. Similarly, the EU employed their own Titan fleet to transfer divisions from the other posts in northern Africa. While conflict raged on the ground, a secondary battle ensued in the skies as both sides attempted to airborne delivery of reinforcements. In an attempt to stop the flow of European Union reinforcements to the Suez Canal, the PAC launched a series of raids against key transportation hubs. The most vital of those targets were Tunis Harbor. Fog in the Strait of Sicily allowed the PAC to land its 8th Command Regiment almost on top of the harbor defenses. This strategy enabled them to pin the EU forces into the harbor with the Mediterranean at their backs. The Valkyrie Brigade formed the backbone of the European Union's defense with their company of L5 racing battlewalkers. In 2144, European Union forces established a secret Titan repair and rearmament base on Wake Island with the intent of dividing PAC forces and their supply lines from the east and west of their location. The constructions of the base went undetected until PAC satellites detected military activity in the region and in response sent in their forces to put an end to the European Union occupation and its plans. In the early years of 2145, Earth was freezing rapidly. All the remaining zones of the planet became heated battlegrounds. The most explosive battle of all was focused in the Hawaiian Islands. Known for its lush environments, the islands have now turned mostly to large pieces of rock. It is here on the rock of Molokai that we'll experience the largest engagement in the entire conflict. A few years into the most desperate struggle in the history of mankind, and with the conflict focused around the Mediterranean and Pan-Asian coalition, seized the chance to claim the undefeated natural resources beneath the ice of mainland Europe. By the time of EU is aware of their presence, the enemy is firmly entrenched in the continent's harsh ice fields, among abandoned city ruins. As the European counter-attack progressed through Germany, the Rhine once again became a crucial defensive line. The ice valley created by a frozen river had turned into an almost impossible barrier of broken ice. In the 7th March of 2145, exactly 200 years to the day that 9th U.S. Armed Division crossed Remagen Bridge during the World War II, the European forces launched a bold attack across the ice fields in hope of establishing a foothold in the eastern shores of the Rhine. Port Bavaria was originally part of the network of Titan supply stations spread throughout Europe. As the PAC army advanced in the year 2142, those stations crumbled, one after another, to the PAC forces. In 2145, the port had become the central supply station for PAC Titans patrolling the European continent. As such, it was vital for any counterattack to take control of the station and cripple PAC supply lines. By the late summer of 2145, the EU had managed to push the PAC back through Western Europe, and now the heartlands of old Eastern Germany and the state of Saxony lay before them. As the Arctic winter, which prohibited any troop movement with its freezing temperatures and harsh weather conditions, drew closer, the Central European High Command ordered their armies to attack the city of Leipzig, the last stronghold of the PAC forces in Europe. Under the cover of darkness, the European Union began to infiltrate the frozen labyrinth of buildings. The European Union forces have pushed east, where PAC forces have gathered to make a defensive stand against the enemy. As the main road into PAC territory, this region is a critical location for both armies. European Union intelligence have reported the location of a PAC Titan manufacturing plant hidden away from the front lines in the region known as Karkland. The European Union forces have a chance to severely impact a PAC war effort by taking control of the region and the Titan factory within. In the year 2147, Earth's natural resources are dwindling. Across the globe, PAC and European forces have been exchanging fire in an attempt to secure those valuable supplies. The most important location of all, the diamond mines. Those are the last known operating mines in the world. Without those diamonds, the ability to operate an armies would be lost. And this is it, this is what we get from the scenario's descriptions, and we don't really know how the game ends. Maybe it will be explained in the future titles.